I don't know if you've noticed, but there just seems to be recently a resurgence of rainbows. They're appearing everywhere. I've seen them in people's windows in their houses. I've seen them in shops advertising different products. And I've also seen them on television appearing quite regularly. And it just seems to be at the moment that there's a resurgence of the flavour and the picture and the concept of a rainbow, which I find is very, very interesting, because the rainbow belongs to the Lord and belongs to his church. Over recent years, the rainbow has been used by various other lobby groups, Rainbow Warrior, the Greenpeace vessel that sails the world dealing with environmental issues. They use the rainbow, and various other groups have taken the rainbow to promote their particular philosophy. But the rainbow belongs to our Heavenly Father. There are 3 rainbows in the Bible. 2 of them are very obvious and one of them is hidden in a mystery. Let me deal with the 2 that are very open. First of all, in the book of Genesis, the very first book of the Bible, the rainbow appears after the flood. Noah saved his family and saved the animal kingdom and creation, and when God drained the flood and when they were perfectly safe, God put a rainbow in the sky, and the rainbow was the covenant of God's promise that he would never again judge the world by a flood, and he used the rainbow as a sign of his promise and a sign of his covenant. In fact, it was the first time that generation had ever seen a rainbow and the first time they'd ever seen rain. Dew used to come up from the ground in the mornings and the evenings, that would be the watering for pastures. No rain had ever appeared until the flood came. And because God repented of his judgment of the people, he said he would put a rainbow in the sky, and that would be his covenant promise, the very first book in the Bible. There's a rainbow in the last book of the Bible, book of Revelation. Around the throne of God, there is an emerald rainbow. And the emerald rainbow is a sign of his scintillating presence, of his wonderful grace and glory. And shining around the throne of God is an emerald rainbow. Again, it's the promise of God that his church would be with him forever and forever. No more sickness, suffering, tears, death, or the former things are passed away. No more fear, no more crying. We're with the Lord forever. And to seal that, there's an emerald rainbow shining around the throne of God. So in the first book of the Bible, you've got God's promise with a rainbow. In the last book of the Bible, again, there's a promise of a rainbow. But there's also a mystery rainbow, and it's hidden in Paul's writings to the Ephesian church. The Ephesian letter is all about the churches, God revealing his church, pulling back the mystery of time, re-emphasizing his grace and glory to a lost world and a lost humanity. And Paul writes about the church in a very spectacular way, particularly in chapter 3. In chapter 3, Paul says the church has always been a mystery. It wasn't God's sudden, wonderful idea. He always had a plan to bring a church, a body of people together, that through that body of people, he would display his grace and his glory. And chapter 3 deals with the unfolding of the mystery. It's as if God pulled the curtains back and revealed the church in a blaze of glory. In verse 10, there's a very interesting word. Paul says in chapter 3 and verse 10, it is God's intention that now through this church, the manifold wisdom of God would be displayed to a watching universe. And he describes the grace of God and the glory of God in such an amazing manner. And he uses the word manifold. Now, the New Testament was written in Greek. Translating the concept of the mystery was very, very difficult. Most translators have used the word manifold. You'll find it in the King James, the New King James, the Old King James, the Revised Standard, the American versions of the Bible. Most of them use the word manifold because there's no close meaning to the concept of this mystery. Paul is an amazing writer. He's an apostle, he's a church planter, he's an amazing character with his history, he's learned, he's got a brain, he understands Hebrew and Greek, and he's an amazing descriptive writer. but he's also at times a perfect nuisance because he doesn't just use words, he uses concepts. And the concept that he used is a very interesting one. And most people, most commentators and translators have found it very hard to translate, and they all use the word manifold. Now, we don't use that word very often today. We don't talk about manifold meals or manifold houses or manifold marriages. We don't use that word. It's a sort of a King James archaic term. But the word that he used is a Greek word called polypikilos. And the word polypikilos has no direct translation from the Greek into English. It's a kind of fusion of ideas. It's a concept word rather than just a direct translation. The closest that you get, if you read some of the great wisdom of the world in commentaries and the great intellects and theologians, the greatest display of this, the greatest understanding of this is the word colour and scintillating light or effervescence. It comes from a word and the concept of glory and grace and wonder and spectacle. And if you look at synonyms in any dictionary, there's a synonym that literally talks about the spectrum of a diamond, when a diamond flashes with light and it throws up colours all over the world, or a crystal, it shows colours. And it also does the same thing when you talk about the rainbow. A rainbow is a refraction of light through moisture, and that's why we get beautiful rainbows. Interesting fact is, the best rainbows are always against the darkest sky. The darker the sky, the more brilliant the rainbow. And so Paul's concept is trying to say God has a mystery. It's a church, it's a body, it's a people of believers. It's a group of people that will shine in darkness against the backdrop of an evil world, and that through the church, not angels or principalities and powers, not archangels, seraphims and cherubims, but ordinary people saved by grace, brought together and fused into a church worldwide. Through that church, God is displaying his spectrum, his grace and his glory and his wonder. And it's that word that Paul uses to describe the church. It's as if Paul is saying, the church is fine, the church is good, the church is alive against the backdrop of an evil world where darkness and fear is engulfing us. But God has planned a promise. First book of the Bible, a covenant. Last book of the Bible, a rainbow of promise for the church. And hidden in a mystery, Ephesians 3:10, it is God's intention that through this church, his spectrum of glory and his scintillating grace and his marvellous work of recreation of the human life born again is God's promise to a world. So in the midst of fear, in the midst of the backdrop of darkness, when everything seems to go wrong, it's okay, because God has a church, a people, brought out of darkness into his light, and they shine just like a rainbow. So today, wherever you are, and whoever is listening to this simple thought for the day, cheer up, you're God's promise to a world. You shine like a rainbow, a spectrum in the midst of darkness, and all is well. Be greatly blessed today, because you're God's promise to a lost generation. God bless you.